Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The night it all started falling apart is etched in my memory like it was yesterday. Zoe, my wife of 7 years, had told me once again that she'd be working late. Recently, this had become a common occurrence. She'd been staying late at the office frequently, always with a reasonable excuse. A tight deadline, an urgent client call, a team project that required her presence. At first, her reasons seemed plausible, but then, one evening, I caught a faint whiff of cologne on her blouse, something unfamiliar, something that wasn't mine. The image of her standing in the doorway with that tired smile, somehow not matching the look in her eyes, has stayed with me. I felt something was different, something I couldn't quite identify, but I pushed it away, convincing myself it was just a passing thought, a harmless worry. Yet that night, sleep eluded me, my mind racing with doubts that refused to quiet. Over the following days, my suspicions grew, pressing against me, insistent and unshakable. One evening, while Zoe was supposedly out at a business dinner, I sat at home, restless, half watching a movie after putting the kids to bed. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from my friend David. "Mateo, you okay? You seem distant lately," he texted. After hesitating, I decided to be honest. To tell you the truth, something doesn't feel right with Zoe. She's either working late, out with friends, or when she's here, she feels absent. David responded thoughtfully, his message straightforward. "Have you talked to her about it?" "I've tried," I replied. "But she just says I'm imagining things." David's answer was firm but gentle. "Look, I'm not saying there's anything going on, but if you're feeling this way, maybe it's worth looking into." His words lingered in my mind, a turning point in my own. I knew then that I needed clarity. The next morning, as Zoe headed for a shower, she left her phone on the counter. My heart thumped wildly as I picked it up, knowing I was crossing a line but feeling as though I had no other option. A single notification caught my eye, a message from someone listed only as M. Hands shaking, I opened it, apprehension mingling with dread. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." The words felt like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and numb. I set her phone down, hands trembling as I tried to regain my composure. When she walked back into the kitchen, I forced myself to act as if nothing was wrong. She kissed me absent-mindedly on the cheek and left, completely unaware of the storm that had just erupted within me. As soon as the door closed, I sat there in shock, trying to process what I'd seen. This wasn't a casual fling. She was emotionally involved with someone else, and I had been oblivious. That evening, as she claimed she'd be working late once more, I knew I couldn't just sit back. I made arrangements for the kids to stay at my mother's and prepared to follow Zoe, determined to find the truth. I parked outside her office building, watching. She arrived shortly after, walking briskly in her heels, looking as striking as ever, but with an edge of tension. Time dragged, and unease filled me. Finally, I saw Julian, her colleague, arrive and walk into the building. My stomach clenched. I realized I couldn't turn back now. Hours later, when the building lights dimmed, I entered quietly and followed the hallways to the conference room. My heart pounded as I peered through the glass. There, Zoe and Julian were sitting close together, a table strewn with papers between them. Watching them laugh, their connection undeniable, twisted something inside me. Then, in one painful crystallizing moment, they leaned closer until they were kissing, their embrace deepening with a passion I hadn't seen in years. My breath caught, my surroundings blurring as my reality disintegrated in utter silence. It felt as though my entire world was unraveling right in front of me. "Zoe!" I yelled as I entered the room, my voice reverberating off the walls. "What is happening here?" She spun around, her face losing all color. "Mateo, how did this—" She stammered. A sharp pain tore through my chest, each word feeling like splinters pressing into my heart. "How could you do this to me? To our family?" I demanded, my voice raw. "It's not what you think. We were just—" She tried, but I cut her off, unwilling to listen. Just what? Just betrayal? My anger surged through me. You've been hiding, sneaking around like some stranger for months. Julian stepped back, raising his hands as if to defuse the situation. Mateo, maybe we shouldn't discuss this here, he said cautiously. I glared at him. Stay out of it, I barked. This is between Zoe and me. Tears began to well in Zoe's eyes. Mateo, please, let's just talk this out, she pleaded. Talk? You think a few words can erase this? I shouted, feeling as though the ground was slipping away beneath my feet. You've destroyed everything, Zoe. You've destroyed our family. I never intended for any of this to happen. I swear, she said, her voice shaking. I was lonely, and Julian was just there to listen. Her excuse felt hollow to me. Lonely? With 2 kids at home? That's what you call loneliness? My voice dripped with bitterness. What about Emma and Jake? They adore you, and this is what they get in return? I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make this right. Her voice held desperation, but I couldn't hear her. Unable to stand it any longer, I turned and left, feeling pieces of myself breaking away with each step. I got into my car and drove, my vision blurred by tears as I sped through the dark streets. Barely avoiding the guardrail, my mind was awash with one agonizing thought. How could she betray me? How could she betray our family? By the time I pulled into the driveway, the silence of the house offered a momentary, hollow sense of calm. The kids were at my mother's for the weekend, thankfully. As I walked through our empty home, the ache in my chest grew sharper. Memories of laughter and warmth echoed in the stillness. I went to our bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and began packing. Each item I tossed into the bag, feeling like another piece of my heart breaking away. I grabbed a few shirts, a couple of jeans, not even knowing how long I would be gone. As I packed, my eyes caught sight of our framed marriage certificate on the wall. My throat tightened. In one swift movement, I pulled it down and tore it in half. The finality of it washed over me, making everything feel inescapably real. With my suitcase ready, I knew I had to leave, if only for a few days to clear my head. I booked a room at a nearby motel, hanging up the phone with a dread that settled heavily within me. My life had spiraled beyond my control, and for now, I was truly on my own. Later, when Zoe returned, she called out for me, her voice echoing through the house. All she found were empty hangers and the torn remains of our marriage certificate scattered on the floor. She seemed panicked as she searched through the rooms, her voice growing desperate. Mateo, where are you? She cried, her tone laced with panic. She tried calling my phone, but I'd already silenced it. Mateo, please, she pleaded into the voicemail. I love you. I can make this right. Just give me a chance. Please come back. But I was unmovable. A few hours later, I confided in my friend David, finally sharing the suspicions that had haunted me. Zoe's betrayal struck deep, and the pain was suffocating. Desperate for some relief, I reached out to David, hoping he'd join me for a drink. We met at a bar near my motel, and as we sat together, I let the full weight of my heartbreak spill out. I told him I was ready to pursue a divorce, and he listened with patience and understanding. David even offered the name of a reputable attorney who could help me through the process. We ordered a few more rounds, and our conversation ran late into the evening. By the time I returned to the motel, exhaustion had set in. The next morning, I wandered aimlessly through a nearby park, my hands shaking as the truth of my situation fully settled in. Each step felt heavier than the last, and as the days passed, I remained in the motel, lost in long hours of contemplation, thinking about my marriage, my children, and the uncharted road ahead. Eventually, it was clear that I couldn't keep living in limbo. The love I'd once felt for Zoe had eroded, leaving nothing to rebuild. Finally, when I gathered the courage to call her, her voice was filled with desperation. Mateo, talk to me. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I love you, she said. That's not enough, Zoe, I responded, my voice low and heavy. You've broken my trust. I can't just pretend that didn't happen. Her pleas grew more insistent, her voice laced with tears. I'll go to counseling. I'll change. Just don't do this, she begged. I took a steadying breath, replying carefully, I'm thinking of the kids. I don't want them to be caught up in this. Her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. Mateo, please don't leave me. The silence after her words was thick with the weight of what we'd lost. I knew I had to stand firm for the sake of our children, to give them a chance at a life free from the growing tension that had come between us. After I ended the call, I gathered myself and dialed my mother's number. She answered almost immediately, her warm voice offering the comfort I desperately needed. Mateo, honey, is everything okay? She asked, her tone full of concern. I hadn't yet shared any of this with her, but I could tell she sensed something was wrong. Mom, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. There's something I need to tell you. It's about Zoe and me. The words felt heavy, but once I began, it all came tumbling out. I told her about the late nights, the lies, and finally how I had discovered Zoe with someone else. She listened in silence, and when I finished, I heard a gentle sigh on the other end. Oh, Mateo, she murmured, her voice thick with empathy. I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were going through this. What do you think you'll do now? She asked softly. I don't know, I admitted. It's so overwhelming. Right now I can't even imagine going back to the house. I think I'll stay at the motel a few more days just to clear my head. She was quiet, absorbing all I had shared. What about Emma and Jake? She asked gently, her voice full of concern for my children. That's part of why I'm calling, I said, rubbing my temples as the reality set in. I think it's best if they stay with you for a bit, just until things calm down. I don't want them exposed to all this tension, and I need time to figure out how to explain it all to them. She sighed softly, but I could hear the reassuring firmness in her reply. Of course, sweetheart. They're welcome to stay as long as you need. I'll keep them busy, take them to the park, and make things feel as normal as possible. You focus on what you need to do. Thank you, Mom, I whispered, relief washing over me. I don't know what I'd do without you right now. You don't have to do this alone, Mateo, she said, her voice steady and full of love. Take all the time you need. Whatever happens, remember, you have a family that loves you and is here for you. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Her words, her unwavering support, gave me a sense of comfort I hadn't felt in days. Knowing that Emma and Jake would be safe, surrounded by love and stability, brought me a sliver of peace in the middle of the storm. The road ahead stretched out dauntingly, yet at least I wasn't journeying it alone. Just days after it all began, I returned to the house. Zoe was there, waiting. Her face bore the evidence of endless tears, her eyes puffy and red, but strangely I felt no stir of emotion. I was there to gather the last of my things, to turn a new page without her. Mateo, please, she murmured as I packed up. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I responded with a tone as empty as I felt inside. Zoe, do you really think I could trust you after everything that's happened? Her voice broke as she reached out, desperate. I was lost, Mateo. I got tangled in something I never intended, but I see now how wrong I was. Please, we have to try, for Emma and Jake. I closed my suitcase, my chest heavy with an ache I couldn't define. I'm doing this for Emma and Jake, I said quietly. They deserve parents who truly respect each other. I can't give them that anymore. That same day, I made the call to my lawyer and began the divorce process. Breaking the news to the kids was the hardest thing I've ever done. They were too young to grasp why Daddy wasn't coming back, but I swore to myself that I'd stay present for them, striving to be the father they needed, even if it meant starting over completely. My priority was to shield them from the fallout of our broken marriage. In the following months, I rebuilt my life, piece by piece, discovering strength in corners of myself I didn't know existed. The nights were long, and the sting of betrayal didn't fade easily. But eventually, I settled into a new normal, one without deception or empty promises. Reflecting now, I realized that I lost something valuable back then, but I also unearthed what truly matters to me: honesty, loyalty, and a love that can endure. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Grace and Logan had shared 12 years together, yet to her, the spark of their beginning remained vivid, almost as if it had all happened just yesterday. Every detail of their first encounter stood sharply in her mind. The way she first spotted him in that introductory sociology class during freshman year. Logan had slipped into the room a bit late, scanning for an open seat among rows of occupied desks. She had noticed him right away, his hair slightly tousled, and the soft, sheepish grin that flickered as he finally settled a few rows over. Though they hadn't exchanged a single word, something about his presence had caught her, as though he alone stood out in a sea of faces. At that time they were strangers, yet the mere sight of him brought a new brightness to her days. Before long, their paths began crossing in unexpected places, the library, the campus cafe, and eventually in study sessions organized with mutual friends. One evening, as they were leaving class, he finally approached her with that same easy smile, and a conversation bloomed between them. From then on, they became inseparable, their lives gradually intertwining. Logan's warmth and humor quickly drew her in. He had a knack for making her laugh, even during her most stressful days, and she loved it. Grace, on the other hand, was more reserved, yet Logan had a way of drawing her out, making her feel truly appreciated and understood. They would spend hours talking about everything, their dreams, fears, and ambitions. Logan often joked that from the moment they met, he was in it for the long haul. A couple of years after graduation, they married in a small, heartfelt ceremony surrounded by close family and friends. Soon they welcomed a son, Alex, a year into their marriage, followed by their daughter, Sophie, 3 years later. Their close-knit family grew, bound by love and shared routines. Together, they constructed a life with each choice, whether where to live, how to manage finances, or which schools to choose for the kids, laying the foundation of their home and their bond. However, over time, the once vibrant passion between them had softened, replaced by the steady rhythm of everyday life. Their marriage had become dependable and familiar, but the original intensity had faded, gradually replaced by the demands of daily life, work, school activities, bills, and household tasks. Grace, who once felt deeply seen by Logan, now often felt like she'd receded into the background. Her days were a blur of teaching, caring for the children, and managing their home. By the time she was finished with work and household responsibilities, she was exhausted, often finding Logan already nodding off in front of the TV. She couldn't identify precisely when things had shifted. It had happened gradually, like a shadow stretching over time. Nights that once ended in whispered conversations now ended in silence, with Logan already asleep on the couch or with her grading papers alone. The deepest void, however, lingered in their intimacy. What had once been a cherished part of their relationship now felt distant, like something precious they had set aside and nearly forgotten amid the clamor of responsibilities. Their closeness, once a source of comfort, warmth, and reassurance, now felt elusive. There was always something in the way: long workdays, the kids' activities, the ever-present weight of obligations. And of all the things she missed, Grace missed this sense of closeness the most: the warmth, the silent bond, the understanding they'd shared without words. She suspected Logan felt the same, though they hadn't spoken about it, perhaps out of fear of what such a conversation might reveal. One afternoon, during a brief break between classes, Grace was skimming through her emails when one caught her eye: an invitation to her high school reunion. She hadn't been back to her hometown in years, and the thought of seeing her old friends stirred a deep nostalgia within her. She felt a sudden longing for the girl she used to be, for the days when her life had felt simpler, open to possibility. She wondered what had become of her old classmates, how their lives had turned out. That evening, with a tentative hopefulness, she brought it up to Logan. "Would you come with me to the reunion?" she asked, hoping the shared night could rekindle something between them. Logan looked back at her, his expression softened with an edge of regret. "I'd love to," he said sincerely. "But with this new project at work, I'll be tied up for the next few weeks. I don't think I can make it." Grace masked her disappointment with a practiced composure. She had envisioned sharing this trip with him, letting him see the world that had shaped her. "I get it," she said, managing a small smile. "It's just a weekend after all. I'll go on my own." With that, she put her plans in motion. When the weekend arrived, she packed her bags, kissed her children goodbye, and set off toward her hometown. As she drove, excitement mixed with a nervous energy she hadn't anticipated. Mile by mile, memories surfaced, filling her with a nostalgia that was both comforting and bittersweet. She wondered about her old friends, the paths their lives had taken, and whether she'd still see herself reflected in their eyes. The reunion took place in a chic bar on Main Street, a place with dim lights, rich wood decor, and the gentle hum of jazz underscoring the evening. Stepping inside, she was instantly swept back in time. The scents, the familiar voices, the laughter, all of it brought a flood of memories from a life that once felt so close. People huddled in small groups, laughing and catching up, their conversations flowing with the ease that only years of shared history could provide. Grace wandered through the crowd, hugging old friends, laughing, and letting herself drift in the memories. Then, amidst the chatter and music, she saw him, Lucas. Lucas, her first love, the one who had once known her heart as well as his own Dot in high school. Lucas had been her confidant, the boy who understood her dreams and fears. They'd imagined a future together once, even believed they'd attend the same college, maybe even marry. But life had pulled them in separate directions, and after graduation they'd lost touch, each swept away by the currents of adulthood. Seeing him again stirred emotions she hadn't expected. Lucas saw her at that exact moment, and his face broke into a warm smile as he made his way over. "Grace," he said, pulling her into a hug. "It's been way too long." They started talking, filling each other in on the years that had passed. Lucas had become a writer, recently divorced, and now lived just a few hours away. As they reminisced, their conversation settled into the familiar rhythm of old times, flowing as if the years between them had been merely days. Grace found herself laughing more than she had in a long time, sharing stories about their classmates' quirks, their misadventures, and memories only the two of them would understand. Being with him felt like slipping into a favorite sweater, warm, comfortable, and familiar. As the evening deepened, Lucas looked at her with a new intensity. "Want to get out of here?" he asked quietly. "Maybe find somewhere quieter where we can talk?" Grace felt a surge of emotion, a mix of anticipation and trepidation. She knew that agreeing might blur the lines she'd drawn, yet a part of her, the part that longed for connection, wanted to say yes. She nodded, and together they left the bar, stepping into the stillness of the night. They strolled to a small familiar park nearby, one they had frequented as teenagers. They found a bench under a canopy of trees, the soft glow of moonlight filtering down Dot. They sat in silence for a moment, each absorbed in memories. Grace took in the familiar surroundings, feeling a tender ache for the simpler days of her youth. "It's surreal, isn't it?" Lucas murmured, looking over at her. "Sitting here with you again. It feels like we're kids." Grace nodded, her voice barely audible. "It does. I haven't felt like this in ages." Lucas's eyes held a quiet understanding as he replied, "I get it. Life doesn't always go the way we think it will, does it?" Grace felt a tightness in her chest as she thought of Logan, her husband, and the life they'd built together. She loved him deeply, loved their children, their home, the life they shared. But there was an emptiness she couldn't ignore, a silent longing for something more raw and honest, a part of herself she had tried to bury, but that now, in this moment, felt impossible to silence. With Lucas by her side, feelings Grace had kept buried for years started to resurface. She whispered, almost to herself, "I feel like I'm slipping away, like I'm just existing without really living." The words escaped her before she could hold them back. Lucas reached out, taking her hand, his touch steadying her. "You don't have to explain," he said gently. "I understand more than you think." They sat together in quietness, her hand resting in his, while unspoken emotions lingered between them. Grace glanced at him, her heartbeat quickening as she felt a familiar, forbidden pull that she had long tried to ignore. She knew it was risky, knew she should hold back, but in that moment, all she wanted was to feel seen, to be understood, to be held. She leaned in, and their lips met in a gentle kiss that deepened slowly, carrying with it the weight of years of suppressed longing. As their kiss grew more intense, years of hidden emotions surged forward, washing away the barriers built by time and distance. A spark flared within her, awakening parts of herself she thought had dimmed. They ended up in Lucas's hotel room, and as dawn broke over the horizon, they shared a connection that reached to her core, a depth of closeness she hadn't felt in years. When she awoke later, however, a heavy sense of guilt descended upon her. She turned to see Lucas still asleep beside her, and, for a brief moment, allowed herself to look at him, feeling both warmth and remorse. She had crossed a line, one that couldn't be erased. Quietly, she slipped out of bed, dressed, and left the room without a word. Her heart pounded as she walked down the empty hotel corridor, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. The drive home blurred past, a rush of tangled emotions filling her mind. It was difficult to come to terms with what she had done. She knew it was a mistake, but deep within, she sensed it had also rekindled a part of herself she'd lost. When she arrived home, she saw Logan playing in the backyard with Alex and Sophie, their laughter ringing in the air. The scene was heartwarming, yet a pang of regret swelled in her chest as she realized what she had put at risk. In the days that followed, Grace immersed herself in her marriage. She pulled away from Lucas, ignoring his messages and calls, and threw her focus into reconnecting with Logan. She surprised him with small gestures, started meaningful conversations, and worked to be truly present during their time together. Logan noticed the difference, responding with kindness and affection she hadn't felt in so long. Their laughter returned, their shared moments became more genuine, and gradually, the closeness they'd been missing began to reappear. As months went by, Grace's bond with Logan grew stronger, yet the weight of her choice remained, a quiet reminder of the lines she had crossed. She knew the gravity of her mistake, and though the guilt remained, she also recognized that she had chosen her family, chosen to rebuild the love she had once nurtured so carefully. At times, her thoughts drifted back to Lucas, to the version of herself she had been with him, and to the risks that lingering desires could invite. Yet she found peace in knowing she had committed to her love, her life, and the family she held dear. The memory of that night would always linger, but she had learned to forgive herself, to move forward and to pour her heart into creating something lasting and true with the man she had chosen to love. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. She thought she was clever, but little did she know I was already a step ahead. One of her colleagues, tired of her behavior, had already clued me in, spilling the entire story. So I set my own plan in motion, fully prepared for what was coming. I took a moment to steady myself, letting my emotions settle and getting ready for the confrontation ahead. The night had finally arrived. "It's happening tonight, right?" Mary, my friend, asked me. I nodded confidently. "Yes, tonight." With my plan in place, I decided to wait until after dinner. I'd hand him a beer, and then I'd lay out everything that had been on my mind. "Just stay strong," Mary reminded me. "He's going to resist, but you need to stand firm." I nodded, resolved. "I'm ready. We've thought this through. He won't have much choice in the matter. This is the path forward, and if he truly cares about my happiness, he'll support me." "Exactly," Mary agreed. "But be prepared for some resistance. He might argue, he might even shout, but he'll eventually come around. The trick is to stay calm but determined," she continued. "Let him vent if he needs to, but make it clear you're leading this change." I nodded again, knowing she was right. Besides, he thinks this is only a temporary shift. Once he understands, he might even see the benefits. And then everything will naturally fall into place. I said, feeling a sense of reassurance. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this? Mary asked with a note of caution. Jack is quite set in his ways. But she smiled, reassuring me. Kayla, he's so in love with you. He might be upset at first, but once he calms down, he'll remember how much he cares about making you happy. He'll do what's necessary, even this. Well, I trust your expertise, I replied. You should, she said, a mischievous smile on her face. I've had 2 marriages to figure this out, and my 3rd husband. He's fully supportive. He's so committed now that he even stands by when I'm with someone else. He sometimes even helps me afterward, she said with a softened tone. Before long, Jack will find his place, just like my husband did. You'll have the commitment of your marriage with Jack and the freedom to explore new experiences. As the day wrapped up at work, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Heading home, I had everything set for the evening, including Jack's favorite meal. When he arrived, he greeted me warmly as always with a kiss and an "I love you." Even though I'd meticulously prepared, a flicker of doubt lingered. This was going to be a big change for both of us. Mary had often talked to me about her female-led relationship, or FLR, and I had witnessed the transformation in her husband. He seemed genuinely content with the arrangement. I had a strong feeling Jack would feel the same in time. Dinner went smoothly. We laughed and shared stories, keeping things light. After we'd finished eating, I suggested he relax with a beer while I handled the cleanup. He offered to help, but I insisted he unwind, and eventually he agreed, leaving me to clear the dishes. Pouring myself a glass of wine, I took a deep breath to gather my thoughts before joining him in the living room for the conversation. Jack, there's something important I need to discuss with you, I began. He looked at me, warm and attentive. Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? Here goes, I thought to myself. Jack, this might be a bit challenging to take in at first, but it's something I feel strongly about. Just remember, it's only temporary, I said gently. His expression was calm, showing he was ready to listen. All right, he said. If it's something you need, I'm here to support you. His openness gave me a boost of confidence. There was no sign of alarm, which was promising. We've talked about starting a family, I began. I'm nearly ready for that step, but there are a few things I'd like to experience beforehand. It'll just take a few months, and then we can settle down and focus on having kids. He looked at me with a reassuring smile. That sounds wonderful, honey. And with that, I felt the weight lift, knowing this was the beginning of something new, for both of us. What exactly is it that you're hoping to do? Jack's voice was calm, but I braced myself, knowing the direction of the conversation might surprise him. Jack, I began carefully, I feel like I need some room to explore a bit more freedom before I completely settle down. Just a last few adventures to clear my head. I promise it's only temporary. Once it's done, I'll be ready to commit to you entirely, to be the devoted wife and mother you want. He listened, nodding thoughtfully, which wasn't the reaction I'd anticipated. I understand what you're saying, but what do you mean by these last adventures? Relieved he wasn't upset, I proceeded cautiously. I want to see other people for a short time. We'll still be together. I'll still be here with you, but I'd like the chance to meet and spend time with other men. It's only physical. My heart is yours. After a few months, I'll come back completely focused on our future and ready for us to start our family. Jack's expression remained neutral, though his voice grew slightly firmer. Kayla, it sounds like you've made up your mind already, so I doubt you're looking for my approval. Honestly, I don't agree with this. If you're asking for permission, I can't give it to you. But you're an adult, and if this is what you truly feel you need, I won't stop you. The lack of raised voices surprised me. Things were proceeding much more smoothly than I'd expected. Mary was right. Jack would eventually adjust to the new role I had in mind for him. So, Kayla, how exactly do you see this working? He asked. Are you thinking of moving out, or do you expect me to leave? Will you be going to other people's places or bringing them here? His questions took me by surprise. Oh no, I'd prefer if we both stayed here, I replied quickly. We're still married, and I want to be here with you. Occasionally, I might bring someone back, and when that happens, I'd ask you to stay in the guest room. It doesn't make sense to spend money on hotels when we have the space here." He was silent for a moment. "All right, but I'll say this again. I don't support this. And as long as this is happening, I think it's best if we aren't physically intimate. I want to protect my own well-being, and I won't take risks involving people I don't know." "Understood," I replied, feeling a slight disappointment. "But once I come back fully, I'll make sure to get tested so you won't have to worry." "Fine. Just focus on whatever you need and I'll handle myself," he replied quietly. A hint of sadness passed over me. "I'm really going to miss being with you, Jack. I love you, and our time together has always been meaningful to me. But I get why you feel this way." He gave a slight nod. "So when are you planning to start?" "Well," I replied, "actually, Mary and I are going to a club tomorrow night. We're meeting some colleagues, and if things go well, I might invite one of them back. Since you're uncomfortable with intimacy during this time, maybe it would be easier if you moved into the guest room for the next couple of months." Jack nodded, barely looking up from his newspaper. "All right. I'll be in the guest room by tomorrow night." He turned back to reading as if we'd just discussed something as mundane as plans for the weekend. I was taken aback by his calm acceptance. A surge of victory rushed through me. Though he voiced minor objections and insisted on a temporary separation, he was overall agreeing without the resistance I had feared. Mary was right. In time, Jack would fully embrace this new dynamic, and realistically, I knew that his resistance to intimacy wouldn't last. A week or two and he'd be back in my bed. Slowly, I'd help him settle into his role as the loving husband I envisioned. The next day, I called Mary. "Hey, Mary, it's Kayla." "Hi, how did it go with Jack?" she asked eagerly. "Oh, Mary, you wouldn't believe it. Jack handled everything so maturely." I had steeled myself, expecting him to react harshly, maybe even raise his voice, but he caught me off guard. His response was calm, almost accepting, and a serene expression settled over his face. "I'm impressed," I commented, somewhat surprised. "Didn't I tell you he'd eventually come around?" "Think you could convince him to join us tonight?" Mary asked. I shook my head, feeling uncertain. "No, I don't think it's worth trying. He made it clear, as long as I'm seeing other people, he won't get involved." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that his resolve might waver. In a week or two, I imagined he'd be wrestling with the thought, especially knowing how close I'd be. I figured that soon enough, he'd be itching for attention, and part of me looked forward to keeping him guessing, maybe even pulling back a little to keep things interesting. Since he'd opted for distance, I suggested he relocate to the guest room, and he agreed without a fight. When I left, he was busy packing up his things. He'd assured me that by the time I got back that night, he'd have moved his belongings out of the room, what I now called the ladies' bedroom. I preferred that name over master bedroom, and my friends seemed to agree. "Reclaiming the space is what it's all about," Mary had said, laughing as she helped me get ready for the evening. That night, when I returned, Jack had made solid progress moving his things out. He was packing everything neatly into boxes, though I'd thought he might just carry it all down the hall. He said boxing it up was easier. It would mean fewer trips and gave him a chance to organize what he no longer needed. It made sense, so I didn't think too much of it. Just before I left, he complimented my look. The lingerie, the heels, and the little red dress I'd bought for our 5th anniversary, but had only worn once. "Well, Jack," I said, grabbing my clutch, "I'm heading out now. I'll probably be back around 1, but don't wait up. I may not come home alone." He looked at me and nodded. "No worries," he said, sealing the last box. "I'll be out by then." A slight unease crept over me as I stepped out of the house, though I brushed it off, eager to focus on the night ahead. At the club, I joined Mary, Larry, and Josh. Larry and Josh worked in client relations, both good-looking and rumored to be exceptionally well-endowed, as Mary and a few of our friends had mentioned. While Jack was hardly lacking, I found myself intrigued by what I'd heard about these two, supposedly both gifted in terms of size and skill. "So, Jack's actually moved out?" Mary asked as our first drinks arrived. I nodded, grinning. "Yep, he was nearly done packing when I left and promised he'd be completely moved out by the time I got home." Josh raised a brow. "He really said that?" I laughed. Yes, word for word, he'd be out by then. We all laughed, and Larry added, Shame, I was hoping we could just nudge him over and make it a real party. Maybe in a week or two, I teased. But for now, why isn't anyone inviting me to dance? The night flew by as we danced and sipped drinks, switching partners as the songs played. With both guys, I let myself linger close during the slower songs, feeling their hands settle on my back, their warmth radiating through me. Mary and I took a break in the ladies' room to plan our evening, eventually deciding through a few rounds of rock, paper, scissors that I'd take Josh home, and she'd leave with Larry. Leading Josh back to the house, I noticed it was quiet and dark inside. Jack must have already gone to bed, which worked perfectly. No need for him to see what I had in mind for the evening. I led Josh into my room, and just as Jack had promised, all his things were gone, leaving the room all to us. I might consider showing my appreciation with a small gesture later, but for now, my mind was consumed with other matters. It didn't take long before we started to undress. Josh asked me to keep my garter belt and stockings on, while I had already lost my thong hours ago. I wasn't sure who had taken it, Larry or Josh, but it didn't bother me too much. I could easily get another one. The next 2 hours were absolute pleasure. I began with some teasing to ensure Josh would last longer when we moved forward. We started off in the missionary position before changing things up, ending the first round with me taking control. After a short break, I kept the momentum going, once again taking charge to keep the excitement alive. I lost track of how many times that exhilarating rush swept over me. It was a unique experience, unlike anything I'd felt before, which made me wonder if I could begin to take Josh more seriously. However, he had declined to reciprocate certain attentions, something Jack always did for me, usually multiple times before we progressed further. Josh laughed it off, dismissing it as evidence of Jack's weakness, and insisted that a real man had other ways of satisfying a woman. We wrapped up the night with a quick round in the shower, followed by another session the next morning. Afterward, Josh had to return to his wife and kids. I slipped into my robe and went to make myself some coffee. I was a bit disappointed Jack hadn't already made any, considering it was past 9 a.m. and he was usually up by then. I planned to discuss it with him later. Honestly, would it be too much for him to make coffee and breakfast after I'd been out late? That simple gesture would mean more to me than anything else I might think about doing in return for him letting me move into the spare room. After having a bagel for breakfast, I took a shower and got dressed. The warm water worked wonders on my sore muscles. With no plans for the day, I opted for an old pair of shorts and a t-shirt. Since I was just staying around Jack, I chose a practical bra and comfy underwear. I had just finished tying my hair back into a ponytail when the phone rang. "Hey, girl," I answered, recognizing Mary's number. "Hey, sexy. How was Josh last night?" "Fantastic," I responded. "Everything went exactly as I hoped. The only small downside was that he didn't agree to one request," I added. "Yeah, Larry won't either. You'll find most real men don't do that," she said. "That's why I have a husband who's great at it and never says no, even if I've already had some fun elsewhere." "Incredible," I said. "Jack always takes his time with me, making sure I have at least 2 amazing moments before we move on. And he's really good at it." "Speaking of Jack, how did he react this morning?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I answered, slightly annoyed. "He still seems to be asleep. I was disappointed he didn't make me breakfast or coffee. I thought about doing something nice for him as a thank you for moving to the spare room, but now I'm not so sure." "Yeah, make sure he knows how disappointed you are and let him know what you expect from now on. Keep being assertive with him, but reward him when he does something good. That'll motivate him to try harder." "I'm actually getting annoyed he's still not up," I added. "Hold on a second, I'm going to drag his lazy self out of bed." I made my way down the hall to the spare room and knocked hard on the door, calling his name. No answer. I tried again, but still nothing. I turned the handle and swung the door open. "Oh no," I exclaimed. "What happened?" Mary asked, her voice filled with concern. "Jack's not in the spare room. His clothes aren't even in the closet." "Hold on," I said, rushing through the house. "Damn it! His truck's gone and all his tools are missing." That nagging feeling in the back of my mind was starting to make sense. "Oh no!" I gasped. "What? What's going on?" Mary asked, sounding worried. Jack moved out. Now, I finally understand what he meant. He never specifically mentioned moving his belongings into the spare room. What he said was that he'd be removing his things from mine. Then, he added that he'd be gone by the time I returned. I assumed he meant he'd be shifting to the spare room, but in reality he was telling me he was leaving the house entirely. Great. Now I need to call him and figure out where he went. Wait, no, that's not right. Reaching out to him would make me look weak. I have to stay strong. I can't make contact. He should come back to me on his own. It's fine, really. He's just having a moment. Give it a few days and he'll be back, apologizing and begging to come home. Honestly, this might work out in my favor. It gives me the chance to make him suffer a little before letting him return. Maybe even force him to do something for me. This could work to my advantage. Perhaps I could let Josh or Larry get me pregnant and have Jack raise the child as his own. Are you certain? Absolutely. Just look at everything Jack does for me. I'll admit, you've been right up until now. Naturally. Oh, and by the way, Larry wants to meet you in the storage room at work around an hour into Monday. Do you think we'll actually get away with this? For sure. At least half the women at work are doing it. It's so chaotic that everything has to be carefully planned. I'll email you the meeting details. Just mark it as an off-site meeting. Don't worry about anything. Our boss never visits that storage room, and anyone who needs access knows to ask me first. We talked a bit longer before ending the call. I'll admit I felt a little anxious about Jack moving out. Despite everything, I do care for him and want to be with him forever. But Mary made the idea of a female-led relationship so tempting, offering me the chance to try something new. I might eventually stop seeing other men, but Jack would always be my loyal husband. Who knows? Maybe a few years down the line, I could even negotiate something with Jack, where I get to tie him up in exchange for agreeing to stop seeing other guys. But I'm not ready to let go of that just yet, and he doesn't need to know that. Maybe I could use it as leverage to get him to come back. Just a thought. In any case, I needed some time to recover after everything that happened last night, especially with a busy day ahead at work. I chuckled to myself, prepared a light dinner, poured myself a glass of wine, and then went to bed. It was Friday morning, and I still hadn't heard from Jack all week. Mary told me it wasn't that surprising and reassured me that I'd be hearing from him soon. The longer he stayed away, the more control I had over the situation, and the more terms I could set for his return. Every day this week, I'd met with Larry, Josh, and a few other good men in the storage room. Today, I even had a double session planned with Larry and Josh. It was Friday morning, and during our coffee break, the four of us, Larry, Josh, Mary, and I, noticed an attractive young woman walking toward us. She was dressed in a professional manner. She introduced herself with a sweet Southern accent, then handed each of us an envelope, quickly snapping a picture with a small digital camera. "You've all been served," she said with a smile, before turning and walking toward our boss's office. I called out after her, "What's this?" "Honey, I get paid to deliver them, not to read them," she replied with a grin, then entered our boss's office without knocking. Less than a minute later, she emerged, cheerfully wished us all a nice day, and left the building. We all opened our envelopes at the same time. Petition for divorce. Oh no. As I read on, I saw the reason listed: marital infidelity. I froze, stunned. Just then, both Josh's and Larry's phones began to ring. The air was thick with tension as the two of them simultaneously exclaimed, "Oh no!" The weight of their words left no room for further explanation, so let me offer a brief summary. Their wives had just confronted them, having come across irrefutable evidence of their betrayals. Their belongings were being packed up, and from that point onward, they would have to figure out where to stay, taking turns in shifts. Additionally, they were informed that divorce papers would soon be arriving. "What the hell is going on?" came a furious shout from the depths of our boss's office. Without warning, he stormed into the hallway. As his eyes landed on the four of us, he bellowed so loudly that even the farthest corners of the office could hear, "Adams, Morgan, Johnson, Jones, get in here, now!" A heavy dread settled over me. We lowered our heads and shuffled into his office, where he slammed the door behind us. The gravity of the situation was impossible to ignore. Do you care to explain this to me? He demanded, waving a manila envelope in our faces. We were too stunned to offer any response. Let me fill you in, you idiots, he continued with a sneer. The company is being sued for violating the moral code set out in our employee handbook. Any of you have a clue why someone might want to do that? Again, none of us dared to speak. Let me spell it out for you, he said with increasing venom. We're being sued because Mrs. Adams can't seem to keep her legs crossed. Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson can't keep their pants on, and Mrs. Morgan has turned the storage room into her own private brothel. Now, can any of you geniuses confirm this isn't true? Can anyone guarantee me that none of this nonsense happened during company hours or on company property? Anyone? He paused, but when no one replied, his frustration reached a boiling point. Are you serious? What the hell were you idiots thinking? He raged. And here's the kicker. This court order is preventing me from firing you until this whole mess is resolved. Now get the hell out of my office while I try to figure out how to deal with you four imbeciles. With our heads still bowed, we shuffled back to our desks. From that point on, I barely managed to get any work done. At least I still had a job, for now. I decided to take a look at the divorce petition to assess just how much trouble I was in. It wasn't pretty. The document contained photos, videos, audio recordings, and even a few notarized letters. Things were looking grim. About an hour later, an email was sent out to everyone in the company. It read, "To all employees, management has been made aware of multiple violations of the company's moral code of conduct, as outlined in the employee handbook, particularly involving work hours and company property. Given the number of employees involved, and the possibility that this issue may be more widespread than currently documented, decisive actions will be taken. Since management cannot be certain of the extent of these violations, or how many employees are involved, the following measures will be implemented. All employees are required to review the Moral Code section of the Employee Handbook. An online training session will be available over the weekend, and all employees must complete the course by next Friday. Security will conduct random checks of all secluded areas throughout the day, multiple times a day, until permanent security cameras are installed. From now on, the storage room will remain locked. The key will be held by the head of security, and any supplies will only be accessed with a security escort. It will be monitoring computer usage to ensure no personal activities are taking place on company devices. Prohibited activities include, but are not limited to, organizing non-work-related meetings with colleagues or others during work hours, using personal email accounts on company computers, browsing non-work-related websites, sending personal text messages, and any non-work-related communication during work hours. Communication with colleagues will be restricted to the break room during scheduled breaks and lunch periods. Security will be present throughout the building to enforce this policy. In accordance with company policy, the names of those responsible for these actions will not be disclosed. I am confident this will not be necessary. Just 2 minutes after reading that, my inbox was flooded with venomous messages from co-workers. After work, I met up with the other 3 at a bar just across the street. We sat at a small table tucked in a corner. A few colleagues were there enjoying happy hour as well, and their glares toward us were anything but friendly. For now, at least, we're still employed. I guess that's something, I said. It was considerate of him, I suppose. But why do you think Jack included this clause in the divorce papers? Oh, Josh replied, his tone dripping with cynicism. It's so obvious it hurts. He wasn't trying to make things easier on you. He was trying to make them even worse. What do you mean? Alimony. Right now, it might seem like a moot point because he's accusing you of infidelity. But this is his backup plan. If you have a stable job and solid income, there's little chance a judge would grant you alimony. But if you lose your job and can't find another, a judge with some empathy might decide you deserve financial support while you get back on your feet. So stay employed until the divorce is finalized. Lucky you. After that, it's likely all 4 of us will be out of here with pink slips. And then what? No alimony, no job. You'll be in deep trouble, and unlike me, you won't have a cushion to fall back on. No, this isn't about helping you at all. Damn. In that case, I'll just quit on Monday. Oh, are you really that clueless? Larry asked, incredulous. What do you mean? Quitting means you're voluntarily leaving your job. If you try to ask for alimony after quitting a well-paying job right after the divorce is filed, a judge will be suspicious. Good luck convincing them it wasn't a calculated move to get money from your ex. All they'll see is someone trying to pull a fast one. No. Your best bet is to hold on to your job for as long as possible and save every penny. Things are going to be even tougher for Josh and me. You can bet our wives will get alimony and child support since we both have kids. What do you think will happen when we lose our jobs and can't find anything that pays as well? Keep in mind that alimony and child support are based on your income at the time of the divorce. Damn, this FLR situation doesn't seem so appealing now. I realized I needed to talk to Jack and try to make things right. Sure, I wanted to help my friends, but I couldn't afford to lose my husband. What was I thinking? To hell with my friends. If saving my marriage meant throwing them under the bus, then that's exactly what I'd do. I quickly grabbed my phone. Sorry, the number you've dialed isn't accepting calls from this number. Damn it, Mary, give me your phone. Why? Because Jack blocked mine. I need to talk to him and fix this. She handed me her phone, and the three of them watched me, clearly unconvinced. Sorry, the number you've dialed isn't accepting calls from this number. Damn it. He blocked yours too. Try Larry or Josh's phone. That's not a good idea. I'm trying to make things right. What do you think he'll think if he finds out the first call I make is from one of my lover's phones? Yes, I know. You probably already think I'm an idiot. At this point, I can't argue with that. I was losing it. How do I find a husband who's deliberately hiding on a Friday night? Sitting at his office was pointless. It was closed, and he doesn't work weekends. With my cell number blocked, and Mary's too, I was certain he'd also blocked our home and work numbers. I knew a phone call wouldn't do any good. This was something I had to handle face to face. I needed to figure out where he was and how to meet him. Forget everything about a female-led marriage. Right now, I'd submit completely if that's what it took to get him back. It was amazing how quickly things had shifted. Just this morning, I was planning to make him beg and humiliate himself to come back. Any guesses who's going to be begging now? I grabbed my phone and began scrolling through my contacts. Surely one of his friends had to know where he was, right? But spoiler alert, none of our mutual acquaintances had any clue. Well, that's not entirely true. None of the people who had remained in contact with me seemed to know. However, many of our old friends, now harboring bitterness toward me, knew exactly where he was. The frustrating part was that, while they were quick to tell me they had the answers I so desperately sought, they refused to share any details. When I asked if they would pass along a message, they laughed in my face. I had just finished a phone call and was working on my fourth drink, already feeling the oppressive weight of the evening's sadness. That's when Josh decided to present his idea. Yes, sarcasm fully intended. Maybe it was the mood I was in, or maybe it was just the inherent difference in how men and women think. Some of you might even think Josh's suggestion was brilliant. Me? I certainly didn't. Josh started with, "Since our lives are already falling apart, why don't we head over to Kayla's and spend the night there, just the four of us? We've had a little fun already, so why not make it an all-nighter?" He honestly thought this was a great idea. Maybe it would have been for him, but I had a solid grip on common sense. Sure, if there was nothing left to salvage, it could have been an option. But I still clung to a tiny, fragile hope that there might be something left between Jack and me. That small possibility would vanish in an instant if I invited everyone over for a night of reckless abandon. So I politely declined and suggested Mary take the others home instead. I had a husband to win back. Over the course of the weekend, I exhausted every idea I could think of to track Jack down. I spent hours driving around motel parking lots, hoping to spot his truck. I drove by his friends' homes at all hours, hoping to see his truck parked outside. I even tried to follow his best friend, hoping he would lead me straight to Jack. Nothing worked. By Monday morning, I was sitting outside Jack's office building, watching as everyone else showed up. But Jack? He didn't appear. I waited for another hour, but still, nothing. Although I was already late for work, I couldn't bring myself to care. It didn't matter anymore. They wouldn't fire me now, and I'd be out of there as soon as everything settled. None of that seemed important in the moment. I left my car behind and walked straight into his office building. I saw that Jack's office door was closed, so I asked the receptionist if he was in. She told me he was out for 2 weeks. That was all. My boss gave me an angry look when I showed up 2 hours late, but I didn't care. Of course, all the phones I could use were blocked. His friends wouldn't help. I couldn't even get a message to him through his workplace. I had no idea where he was, so showing up at his home was out of the question. Sending mail wasn't an option because I didn't have an address. So what other options did I have? Email. He always checks his email. I could only hope he hadn't blocked mine. There was no harm in trying. Jack, I have no excuses, so I won't waste your time with any. All I can say is that I somehow got caught up in a foolish streak. I don't blame Mary for any of it. I made my own choices. But hearing her talk about a female-led relationship sounded so tempting at the time. Honestly, I don't know why I thought you'd ever go along with it. Yes, I should have known better. I'm deeply sorry it took a metaphorical slap to bring me back to my senses. But now I see things clearly, and I am ashamed and regret everything I did. I understand if you can't forgive me. But Jack, despite my mistakes, I love you with all my heart. Don't for a second think that you did anything wrong. It was me, being selfish and foolish. Jack, my love, even though I don't deserve it, I'm begging for your forgiveness. Please, let me come back. I'll give you everything I have to make things right. I now realize how ridiculous it was to try and force a female-led relationship, but I would be more than happy to be part of a more traditional marriage. Yes, Jack, I'm laying myself bare before you, ready to follow wherever you lead, willing to do anything to regain my place by your side. I offer you everything I am, with no limits, Jack, absolutely no boundaries. I'm asking, with all my heart, for another chance. You know I've never felt an attraction to women, but I'd join you in any way you desire, even with someone else if that would bring us closer again. I'd even host your friends for the Super Bowl, wearing just a garter belt, stockings, and heels if that's what you wanted. If total control is what you seek, just say the word. My loyalty and trust are yours completely, even if it means punishment before others. Would you like to use a leather belt? Just tell me the time and place and I'll bring it myself. I know I haven't given you reason to trust me, so I'm ready to lock myself in a chastity belt and give you the key. I've even had my blood tested for STDs. The results will be in soon. Let me know where to send the report and it's yours. Jack, you've always been the best person I've known and I trust you wouldn't hurt me, even if I might have earned your anger. Whether you choose to discipline or humiliate me, even marking my body with tattoos or piercings, I accept it. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trust right now. All I'm hoping for is the chance to be with you again, on whatever terms you choose. I'll return and be by your side, even if it means accepting things I wouldn't have chosen. While I pray you won't move on with others, I understand if you do. It was my mistake, and if that needs to be balanced out, I'm prepared. About Mary, Larry, Josh, and the lawsuit. Mary led me astray and I led her. Josh and Larry took advantage as well. When the lawsuit is settled, I know I'll lose my job just as they will. We're all responsible. If you want to act against them, I'll help in any way you need. I am yours, now and always, your devoted servant, Kayla. Epilogue. Fortunately, Jack hadn't blocked my email. Amazingly, he read it. He didn't immediately believe my promises, though. After all, I had already broken my most solemn vow to him, the promise never to turn away. Why would he have faith in anything I said? All I could do was prove myself, step by step. 2 years have passed since I sent that letter. In the meantime, Josh and Larry's lives fell apart. They went through painful divorces and were fired shortly after the lawsuit was resolved. They eventually found new jobs, but with much lower pay, and now they share a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a tough neighborhood. They've had little luck dating, and their ex-wives have kept the children distant. From what I hear, both women are now in happier relationships. As for me, I'm kneeling at the bedside, stripped down with an accessory and a belt as symbols of my commitment, while Jack finishes his evening routine. Did I promise all this in my letter? Yes, and Jack wanted to see if I'd follow through. If I truly wanted him back, I had no choice. The first 6 months were difficult, but over time he softened. He still expects me to maintain routines like this one, but our life together has become easier. Now, He only brings other women home occasionally, and I've come to accept that as part of our relationship. Since losing my job, I haven't worked. Jack's promotion supports us comfortably, so I stay home, caring for the house and the kids. We have 2-year-old twins. Around the house, I usually dress casually, though Jack has mentioned that as the kids grow, I should adopt a more traditional style to avoid confusion. For now, I only wear full clothing when we go out or have guests. I still greet delivery drivers as I am. I've had piercings on my chest and in an intimate area, which have made me more sensitive. I've also undergone laser hair removal, leaving a permanent line to display my tattoos, one side bearing Jack's name and the other reading property. Each week, Jack uses a leather strap to mark 5 red lines across my back. When he's finished, he removes the plug, and as I steady myself over the couch, he claims me. I'm far from perfect. Occasionally, if I make a mistake, those lines multiply, sometimes appearing on my chest as well. Oddly enough, I've come to find a strange satisfaction in the sensation. Who would have thought the sting of leather could evoke this kind of response? Then there's Mary. Although she's still married, she also faced a form of dismissal. Few believed she'd face any serious consequences, given how tightly she controls her husband. She'll likely just find another job and continue on her path. Justice isn't always dealt out evenly in life. And then there's Harold. Contrary to popular belief, he wasn't as mild-mannered as everyone assumed. When he gathered the whole truth, his fury was intense. I'd thought my last 6 months were rough, but it was nothing compared to what Mary faced. When he decided she'd endured enough, he handed her the divorce papers. In the meantime, he sold their assets without her knowledge, securing the proceeds for himself. Though he left her the house, it was refinanced, with all the equity pulled out. She ultimately lost the home and saw the funds vanish. Now, she has a new job, but it pays only half of what she earned before. Her reputation has taken a hit, and she's no longer seeing anyone. Mary still has another month of antibiotics. You may question why I stay in this situation or feel that I'm reaping what I sowed. If you're unsettled that Jack didn't cast me aside, know that I thank God daily for that mercy, even though I may have deserved it. I stay because I can't picture a life without the man I love. Jack's discipline keeps me grounded, and yet his love for me is unwavering. Yes, Jack has other relationships, but he never seeks them without me by his side. I'm free to leave any time, and he's shown me the divorce papers as proof that he would treat me fairly. I turned down his offer. He's an incredible father, a devoted partner, and a loyal husband. I can't imagine wanting anything else. In my quest for a female-led marriage, I lost track of what was truly important. Now, instead of striving for equality, I find peace in my commitment to my husband. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.